Welcome to Murder Mile, a true crime podcast, an audio-guided walk featuring many of London's untold, unsolved and long-forgotten murders, all set within London's West End. Today's episode is about the upbringing of David Morley and Chelsea O'Mahony. Two very different people, raised by very different parents, under very different circumstances. One was loving and kind, the other was heartless and cruel. And yet, having met by chance, their lives would be changed forever. Murder Mile is researched using the original police files. It contains moments of satire, shock and grisly details, and as a dramatization of the real events, it may also feature loud and realistic sounds, so that, no matter where you listen to this podcast, you'll feel like you're actually there. My name is Michael, I am your tour guide, and this is Murder Mile. Episode 73, The Raising of David and Chelsea. Today, I'm standing on the South Bank, on the south side of the River Thames. A short walk down from the dubious suicide of Roberto Calvi under Blackfriars Bridge. A short walk up from the terrorist attack on Westminster Bridge. A brisk dawdle right of the failed bombing of the Houses of Parliament by Guy Fawkes. The strangely successful assassination of sitting British Prime Minister Spencer Perceval. And a few feet from the murder of Timothy Baxter on Hungerford Bridge. Coming soon to Murder Mile. Officially called Queen's Walk, as a grotty 50-foot wide concrete pavement between Lambeth Bridge and Tower Bridge, this side of the South Bank whiffs of 1950s modernist architecture, as slabs of drab grey are pockmarked with wilting trees, rusty railings, and the brownest river you've ever seen, which teems with local fish like the bum trout, the arse salmon, the stinkleback, and the shit haddock. Oddly, having been redeveloped from an ugly industrial shipping port full of docks, wharfs, cranes, and the former Lion Brewery, now the South Bank has bloomed into an ugly tourist trap, where every year thousands of sightseers flock to explore the real London, only to see long lines of market stalls selling traditional English foods like hot dogs, candy floss, curry and paella, to see aquatic mammals in the Sea Life Centre, none of which are native to London, to see drummers from Tongo in the Royal Festival Hall, to be briefly scared by an out-of-work Aussie actor in the London Dungeon, and to go up a bit on the London Eye, see nothing through the city smog, and then go down again. Ah, great days. That said, the South Bank is a great place for families, as it's always full of mums, dads and kids sharing quality time, laughing, playing and learning invaluable lessons about life. Admittedly, some may be screaming little bags of snot, shit and piss who bleed you dry, but the importance of good parenting can never be undervalued, as the first 7 years of a child's life defines their personality forever. And although just to the south side of Hungerford Bridge, a bench has since been replaced by an anonymous tree, as parents and children play, they're unaware that 15 years earlier, two strangers raised by very different parents would meet here for the very first and the very last time. As it was here, on Friday the 30th of October 2004, that 37-year-old David Morley was kicked to death by 14-year-old Chelsea O'Mahony. And all for fun. On Saturday the 8th of May 1999, in the heart of Soho, the bell of St Anne's rang 3 times. 3 solitary bells reverberated off the walls of Dean Street, Wardour Street and Old Compton Street. their echoes audible in an eerily quiet city, as each ring, one for each victim, John Light, Nick Moore and Andrea Dykes, peeled off towards the setting sun. As the last bell tolled, thousands of people stood, heads bowed, as they observed a minute's silence. A sea of grief, all hugging, weeping and holding hands, in a mix of mournful black clothes and bright rainbow flags, barely 100 feet from the boarded-up remains of the Admiral Duncan pub. One of those mourners was the pub's assistant manager, David Morley. Barely 1 week after the bombing, which had killed 3 and injured 74, with the images still fresh and the pain still as raw as the burns to his hands and face, having narrowly escaped with his life when a nail bomb ripped the pub apart. Although deeply traumatized, as a good decent man who was described as loving and kind, he wasn't there to mourn his loss, but to comfort others. David Morley was born on the 3rd of October 1967 in a small West Midlands village, as the adopted son of Geoffrey and Doreen Morley. As an only child who was raised by a late 30s married couple in good careers, being smart, stable and level-headed, although they showered their baby boy with love, he was never spoilt. So blessed with a good education, they raised him as a fine young man. Likewise, although they weren't his blood, David adored his parents, calling them every week without fail and going with them on holidays. But being quiet, conservative and almost 2 generations older than himself, although the lie ate at his soul, being worried about how the truth might embarrass his beloved parents, by thinking of their feelings instead of his own, he kept his homosexuality a secret. In 1988, aged 21, David moved to London, and more importantly, to Soho. As a gay man working in a gay pub in an openly gay part of town, here David could be himself, and as his confidence blossomed, he became a real showman behind the bar, who regulars nicknamed Cinders. Described as big, jovial, fun and hugely camp, David was the life and soul of the party. He made a good night into a great night. There was never a sad face when Cinders was around, as David wasn't just loved, he was beloved. And with his parents living a quiet village life and rarely coming to London, he kept both worlds apart. But on Friday the 30th of April 1999, at 6:40 p.m, his life changed forever. Left in a rucksack by the bar of the Admiral Duncan pub was a homemade bomb built by a deluded neo-Nazi, consisting of 6 pounds of explosives made from fireworks and fertilizer, a wind-up alarm clock in a transparent sandwich box as a crude timer, and as shrapnel, the bomber had filled the bag with over 1,000 steel nails. So whoever the blast didn't kill, these 4 to 6 inch high-speed projectiles would. 3 people died, 74 were injured, and hundreds were left traumatized. Deafened by screams, blinded by smoke, and disorientated by sirens, as the caustic smell of fertilizer stung his eyes, David's focus wasn't on saving himself, but escorting the injured to safety.
A nail bomb went off tonight in a crowded pub in central London.
At 7 p.m, as David's parents switched on the news, they saw their son's pub all smashed and smoking. The street outside a sea of blood, as unconfirmed reports spoke of injuries and death. Knowing they'd be distraught, 20 minutes later, from amidst the carnage, David called his parents to reassure them, "I'm fine." Over the coming weeks, although physically and mentally scarred, David stood side by side with his fellow survivors at the memorial service at St. Anne's. he spent his spare time visiting the injured in hospital. And being promoted to manager, David saw it as his duty to the community to rebuild the Admiral Duncan pub. And fighting through his own pain and trauma, it reopened just 9 weeks later. The next day, having caught the earliest train to be with their son, and having seen every newspaper headline emblazoned with the words, "Gay Pub Bombed," with his secret out and being riddled with guilt, David apologized to his parents, saying, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." But loving their boy without question, being happy that he was happy, his homosexuality wasn't a problem. In fact, although being born in a generation where they rarely express their feelings, Jeffrey wrote a letter to his son in which he said, "Your mum and I are so proud." David Morley was a rock, a generous, kind and loving man who put others before his own pain, having been the product of two parents who taught him how to be a decent human being. He was strong for those who needed him to be strong, and when asked how he was coping, David would shrug it off with a jovial, "I've had better days." And although he always laughed loud, his smile was painted on, his eyes were full of sadness, and struggling to cope, he partied hard and drowned his fears with booze. In 2004, 5 years after the bombing, David quit drinking and working at the Admiral Duncan. And with the support of his faithful friends, loyal colleagues, and loving family, he finally began to turn his life around. And then, on Saturday the 30th of October 2004, by chance, he met a broken girl from a very different upbringing. And her name was Chelsea O'Mahony. Chelsea Kaylee Peaches O'Mahony was born on the 16th of November 1989 in Edgware Hospital, West London. The middle child of 5 to Suzanne Cato, a single mother, and an unknown convict father. And with both parents being hopeless heroin abusers, Chelsea was born an addict. As a junkie, living in squalor and half-starved, Suzanne didn't give a shit about anything except her next fix, as her wailing babies saw her strung out, shooting up, and with blood spurting from a ripped vein. With no love, care or support, left to fend for herself, a severely neglected Chelsea was found by social services wandering the city streets, alone and at night, aged just 3. Unable to rehabilitate her mum, aged 7, Chelsea was taken into care. To give her an ounce of stability, instead of being fostered out to strangers, she was placed with an aunt and uncle in South London. And to try and maintain some kind of normal relationship with her mum, she was granted regular phone calls. But being too drunk to speak to her own daughter, Suzanne forgot, and the calls ceased. 7 years later, age 14, with her exasperated aunt and uncle unable to cope with the violent, emotional, and unruly girl, who stayed out all night, smoked cannabis and daubed graffiti, Chelsea was fostered out to yet another aunt, this time on the Ethelred estate in Kennington, South London. That year, with her aunt becoming seriously ill, Chelsea was fostered again. Being rejected and displaced by a succession of substitute parents, her most formative years were a fragmented and chaotic mess, as Chelsea was bounced from house to house, with no love, no routine, no role model, and always feeling like she was a burden. No one cared for her, and she cared for no one. And then she found a new family in Darren Case, Rhys Sargent, and David Blenman. Supposedly the leader of the gang, 20-year-old Reese Sargent was an easily led lad who attended a special needs school for his learning difficulties, speech impediment, and emotional problems. Raised by disabled parents, following an abusive upbringing, 17-year-old Darren Case left school aged 13 and was described as aggressive, hyperactive, and psychologically damaged. And 16-year-old David Blenman, having never met his father, was abandoned by his mother, bounced between relatives, suffered from emotional and behavioural problems, and had prior convictions for mugging. In her diary, scrawled in a mix of pidgin English and Jamaican patois, as the lovesick Chelsea mimicked the West Indian roots of her boyfriend David Blenman, she wrote about the gang's violent assaults.
Yesterday, I'd done an all-nighter with Barry, Darren and Reese. Them lot bang up some homeless man, which I think is bad, even though I was laughing after.
Prior to 2004, Chelsea had no criminal record, but simply as a way to entertain herself, with the boys being of limited intelligence, easily led and eager to impress. Having slugged back several bottles of vodka and toked on a few spliffs, the feral gang engaged in an all-night spree of mugging and violent assaults on strangers. At little after 1 a.m, in the early hours of Saturday the 30th of October 2004, with a gang of 6, 2 black boys, 2 white boys and 2 white girls, including 19-year-old Barry Lee and an unidentified girl, all dressed in hooded tops, having chosen their victims at random and attacked with no rhyme or reason, as they did it for kicks. The gang set out from Kennington to the South Bank for a night of violence. In hindsight, their first victim of the night was remarkably lucky. At 2:30 a.m, David Dobson, a 24-year-old actor at the nearby Old Vic Theatre, was confronted by the gang on Lower Marsh, a side street running parallel with the Thames. As part of a pre-arranged plan, when one of them asked, "Do you know what time it is?" as the lone victim glanced down at his watch, being briefly distracted, the cowardly pack pounced and rained down a volley of punches and kicks, as on her phone, Chelsea filmed the assault. David Dobson fled, with little more than cuts and bruises. Sadly, their second victim was not so lucky. At 3:10 a.m, on the dimly lit pavement of Queen's Walk, on the south side of Hungerford Bridge, barely 100 feet from their last attack, the gang sidled up to 2 men, quietly sitting on a bench, chatting by the river. The night was cool and calm, as the 2 friends savoured the soft autumn breeze, having spent a pleasant evening at Heaven, a popular gay club on the embankment. One was called Alistair Whiteside, and the other was his friend of 6 years and a Soho bar manager called David Morley. 5 years after the bombing of the Admiral Duncan, being physically well but mentally scarred and eager to move on, David uprooted to Chiswick, started a less stressful job at Brompton's, another gay pub over in Earl's Court, and enjoying an occasional garden party with his boyfriends and his parents. He had finally begun to find inner peace and to put the horrors of his past behind him. With the 2 men facing the river, having stealthily approached from behind, neither David nor Alistair heard a thing as the gang surrounded them. The 2 girls either side, the 4 lads behind. Being just 14 years old, with a pale cherubic face, neatly parted brown hair, and deep blue eyes, Chelsea looked so innocent, like a little girl who could do no wrong. And with her left eyebrow raised, a jovial lilt to her voice, and an amused smirk on her thin red lips, raising her camera phone to meet David's eye. She quipped,
"We're doing a documentary on happy slapping. Pose for the camera."
And at that, the gang attacked. Kicked to the ground, as David and Alistair lay helpless on the cold concrete slabs, the gang jumped and stamped on the cowering men, pummeling them with a volley of frenzied fists and flying feet. As having been robbed of their personal possessions, the savage beating continued. All the while, Chelsea excitedly captured the moment on her phone, so they could all watch it again later and laugh. Bloodied and bruised, as Alistair lay by the foot of the bench, too disorientated to flee and too terrified to fight back, as with the attack being so swift it was impossible to register. As he turned, slumped by the river railings like a sack of discarded rags, he saw the battered mess of his good friend. David was loving and kind. Chelsea was heartless and cruel, and yet they met by chance. But as two very different people, raised by very different parents, under very different circumstances, it was here that their lives would be changed forever, as the bomb blast survivor met his sadistic killer. Unlike David, the big-hearted barman who always put others before him, having rescued strangers from an explosion, visited the injured in hospital, and comforted those who grieved, Chelsea had no love, no respect, and no compassion for those she had hurt. As unable to attack back those who had hurt her, David was little more than a faceless stranger, and the next best thing to a punch bag. A few feet away, Chelsea stood. Seeing the bleeding man collapsed on the pavement, his hands by his side, as he drifted in and out of consciousness. With a glint in her eye and a grimace on her face, having taken a quick run-up, with a fast right foot, Chelsea kicked David hard in the head, booting it like a football as his skull jolted backwards. And feeling a buzz of exhilaration, as the gang dashed away, whooping and cheering at the fun of their night's entertainment, she kicked his head again and again, as David Morley lay dying. At 3:15 a.m, just 5 minutes later, 3 students sitting on a bench on the opposite side of Hungerford Bridge were subjected to a violent assault. A mobile phone was taken and the gang fled. At 3:20 a.m, as Nigel Elliott sat in Jubilee Gardens by the London Eye, having missed his train, the gang attacked. He was tripped, kicked, robbed, beaten, and smashed over the head with a beer bottle. At 3:30 a.m, on Leek Street near Waterloo Station, the gang violently assaulted a homeless man called Wayne Miller as he lay sleeping rough in a shop doorway. Stamping and jumping on his back and head, as the cowardly gang ran off into the darkness, once again they whooped in celebration. At 5 a.m, having returned to the Ethelred estate in Kennington, they divvied up the loot, which had been stashed in Chelsea's blue trainer's bag, sparked up a few spliffs, and cackled like demented loons, as crowded around the phone, they watched back the grainy footage of their night of terror. To them, it was all just a big laugh. David was transferred to St. Thomas's, a trauma hospital, a few hundred meters from the scene of these 5 violent assaults. Arriving in A&E, unconscious, swollen and bloodied, having sustained 44 injuries, a doctor later said that it was as if he had been hit by a car or had fallen from a great height. As when the feral yobs had jumped, stamped and kicked David, 5 of his ribs had snapped like twigs, causing his left lung to collapse and his spleen to rupture, so 60% of his blood leaked into his body. Jeffrey and Doreen Morley were on holiday when they received the fateful call that their son had been attacked. Just as they had after the bombing, they took the next train to London to be by the side of their beloved son. But having suffered a heart attack in surgery, he was pronounced dead at 7:40 p.m. A thorough police investigation was conducted, but with each area being quiet, unlit, and not covered by security cameras, with the gang's faces hidden by hoodies, identifying them would be impossible. Except with rough sleeper Wayne Miller having been assaulted near Waterloo Station, a CCTV camera had captured his attack in full. Forensics found fingerprints, blood matched a broken beer bottle found in Jubilee Gardens, and with the feckless Yobs having used 2 of the stolen phones, the police tracked their movements and identified 6 youths. 1 week later, as the police entered her foster parents' home in South Norwood, Chelsea pointed to the easily identifiable blue trainer's bag and glibly stated,
"That's what I wore on the night."
And although, in her diary, they had found entries relating to the attacks, when they examined her phone, the footage had been erased. Chelsea O'Mahony was arrested for the murder of David Morley. But with no CCTV, her phone wiped, and being just 14, although she had sadistically kicked David 3 times in the head, which had contributed to his death, with the evidence unsteady, and her defence that she was merely a spectator, it was likely that she would walk away from the serious charge of murder. On the evening of Friday the 5th of November 2004, 5 years after the bombing, another memorial service was held at St Anne's. And as a single church bell rang out, and its sombre echo reverberated off the crowded Soho streets, once again, more than 1,000 misty-eyed people stood in silence. Only this time, one man was missing. But stood in his place was his proud parents. David Morley was a beautiful man, kind, loving and caring, who was abandoned at birth, hid his homosexuality and survived a terror attack, and yet still blossomed into a vital part of the gay community, who always put others before himself and even risked his own life to save strangers. On the 23rd of January 2006, Reece Sargent, Darren Case and David Blenman were sentenced to 12 years for the lesser charge of manslaughter and 6 years for conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm. And although Chelsea O'Mahony claims she hadn't filmed or taken part in any of the attacks, she was found guilty and sentenced to a total of 13 years for manslaughter and conspiracy, which she served in Peterborough Prison. After the trial, Jeffrey Morley said, "I didn't see any signs of remorse on the defendants' faces. I think they were sorry, but only because they got caught." With some of the families of his son's killer causing a disturbance in the public gallery, David's friends and family had to be escorted out of court to safety in police vans, having been threatened by throat-cutting gestures, as someone shouted, "My cousin got 12 years because of your faggot friend." We are all responsible for our own actions. There is no denying that. But how we are educated and raised by our parents plays a big part in the actions we take. Whether we become a kind and loving person who rescues others from a bombed building, or a cruel and heartless yob who beats others to death. No one is born good or bad, but the lessons we learn from those we love can change our lives forever. In September 2009, just 4 years after the murder of David Morley, 19-year-old Chelsea O'Mahony was released on licence from prison. Where she is now is unknown. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to Murder Mile. For all of Mickey's cakey-covered crazy whatnots, there's more doobie-doobie quack-quack after the break. But before that, here's my recommended podcasts of the week.
I can't stop, must follow. Stream Octoberpod wherever I go.
Was you thinking about the show?
Oh, please don't start on me now, Rollo, please.
Rollo says smile. Rollo says dance. Rollo says go summon the devil.
Edward October presents Octoberpod, a terrifying spook show. Available now on YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, and at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.
This is Brew Crime, a craft beer and true crime podcast.
I'm Mike.
I'm Beck.
And I'm Nina.
And we're your hosts.
We pair a true crime story with a craft beer.
That Nina will probably hate.
Yeah, probably.
Whatever. You can find our show on all your favorite podcast apps, and if you can't find it, contact us and we'll try and change that.
We can be found at brewcrime.com or on Twitter at brewcrime, on Facebook at brewcrime, or if you want to go to our group, it's group/brewcrime on Facebook, or on Instagram at Pacific Beer Chat.
Join us as we discuss the horrible crimes that surround us and try not to giggle.
A huge thank you goes out to my new Patreon supporters, who are not too bad. Good. Hello everyone. How you all doing? You all good? You all good and happy and well and etc. It's spider season here at the moment. End of August. They all want to come in, don't they? They all want to come in and have a nose around and go, ooh, what have you got? Ooh. Or one of them did yesterday, saw that I had a nice Bakewell tart on my table and crawled over it. It's a real dilemma of whether, because I love Bakewell tarts, do I eat the cake? But I hate spiders, so do I destroy I destroyed the cake. I know I destroyed the cake. What the hell is going on? I destroyed a cake, but it had a spider on it. I'm not very good with things like that. I'm also not very good. Do you know, this is a thing I used to hate as a kid. Do you know, like you have a sandwich and someone goes, oh, can I have a bit of that? And they bite into your sandwich. I can't do that. It's like you can see their teeth marks. You can see the bit of spittle that they've left on your sandwich. Or it makes me sick. I can't share things. I can cut a bit off. I can cut a bit off as long as someone's hands haven't touched it. It's one of those odd things, isn't it? It's like someone can make you a sandwich and it's fine, but if I know that someone's hands have touched it and it's not my hands, I can't eat it. Just can't eat it at all. Weird, isn't it? It's weird. It's that things like that. But then again, a spider doesn't really have hands, does it? But it's that kind of yeah. So there's loads of spiders trying to get in at the moment. So I'm using lots of citronella, which I've got incense candles and citronella floating around, and that seems to get rid of them. Although the good thing is spiders get rid of the flies, and it's mosquito season, so you get rid of the spiders, the mosquitoes turn up. So it's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? Well, that was waffle, wasn't it? That was waffle to start the day. So welcome to Extra Mile. New listeners, this is the extra bit. I'll tell you some more information about things about the episode you just heard. Things that didn't make it into the episode. Obviously, I'm recording this before I've edited the episode. It just makes sense to record it this way, and then I edit it afterwards. So there might be bits in the episode that I've edited out. I don't know. I won't know until I start editing it after I've recorded this. Well, I hope maybe one day I might do an extra mile where I record something after I've edited it. But I don't know what's really the point. I'm going to say everything I need to say now. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, this bit is all the unedited bit. Unedited, unscripted, as you can tell, full of waffle. And I am now going to move away from the microphone because I need to open a window, because as always I have the windows shut. While I do this, I'm going to open the back door as well. Get some air in. There we go, that's better. Oh, that's better. Can't beat fresh air. Now I don't care about bikes going past. It's quite quiet here at the moment. We're getting to the point where all the kids are going to start going back to school soon, so everything's going to be nice and quiet. Lovely. Best time in the world when all the kids go out to school. Great. So, going to make myself a cup of tea and then I'll be back with you. I'll just have my coffee. It's meant to be called Intenso. It's meant to be an intense coffee. It's a bit wet. And a bit pathetic, so I'm now going to have me a nice Tetley tea. Tetley tea, 2 sugars, powdered milk. Because it's still warm. It's too warm for me to have regular milk, because it goes off so quickly here. Because I don't have a fridge as well. Ooh, but with it today, treat! I'm going to have. This was given to me. I've almost eaten all of Kim. I've almost eaten all of your cakes. One of the Bakewell tarts was the one that the spider crawled over. Thankfully, you provided me with a lot. So I've just got 2 cakes left now. So they're going to go today, probably. You know what I've got 1 big Battenberg to eat, and then the angel cake with the lemony icing. Always save the best till last. That's my top secret. But these were given to me very kindly on the same day from Marita. Is it Marita or Maritha? Can never work out how to pronounce your name. Maritha, Martin, and Preston. Preston, who was on best behaviour that day, wasn't he? Good boy. And they very kindly gave me 2 tins of stroopwafels. I hope I pronounced that right. It's really lovely. I've eaten one already, and they're kind of I would say that's probably about 4 inches wide, circular, little kind of chewy waffles. But they're very nice. I didn't realise you were meant to dunk them, and I ate a whole tin of them the other night whilst watching Porridge, the movie. Porridge, what a great series! So now, with Marita's advice, I'm gonna make my cup of tea and dunk them in the tea. So, stroopwafels and PG, Tetley tea. Right, good. So. Just to say, if you're listening to that and you're going, some of that episode sounds familiar, that's because it's not really a 2-parter, but it's kind of a continuing part of episode 5 of Murder Mile. So if you go right back to the start, this is it was an episode called The Bombing of the Admiral Duncan. That was quite interesting because at the same time, Adam, who does UK True Crime Podcast, Adam, really weird, exactly at the same week, we'd both done the episode about the bombing of the Admiral Duncan, or the nail bombings. But interestingly, we've both done it in very different ways. So Adam had covered all of it, and had done quite a lot about David Morley. In fact, if you go and have a listen, he does actually do a really good 2-parter about David Morley and the bombing of the Admiral Duncan. But we both done it very differently. So with the bombing of the Admiral Duncan, I deliberately had not mentioned about the bomber himself, because I felt that he'd got too much coverage, and that's really what he wanted. Adam had focused on him as well. I'd focused on 3 victims, which were John Light, Nick Moore, and Andrea Dykes. He'd focused on David Morley. This is why I've left this one for so long. I've left it kind of to boil for a little while. So, how long has passed? Almost 2 years. Almost 2 years has passed. So 2 years has passed, and now I'm doing this episode. It is quite nice. It kind of gave me a little bit. It gave me a lot of time to really look at it and decide what angle I wanted to take on it, and it gave me more time to research into the backgrounds of Chelsea and David, and to work out what story I was going to tell, because obviously there's angles you can take with it. I think Adam took the the kind of angle that David was in the wrong place at the wrong time twice, which is an interesting way to do it. Going through it, I decided to do to focus on the parents. I thought that would be a nice way to attack it, because it is a story about, they're two very, very different people, but it's how they were raised as children. Both abandoned by parents, but David was adopted by a really loving couple who gave him all the skills that he needed to survive in life, and Chelsea was basically given nothing, which doesn't say that she's not responsible. As I say at the end, she's not responsible for her actions. She is, but if she would have had a better upbringing, would this have happened? No. People aren't, you're not born evil. No one is born evil at all. But from day one, from the second you're born, from the second you come out of your mummy's tum-tum, you start learning, you start picking up things, you start picking up signals. Even when you're a tiny baby, you pick up little signals. And you can tell the difference between when you're loved and when you're ignored, and when you're hit and when you're stroked. There's a real difference. So as a baby, you can learn a lot. So, tease up! Which is not to say that she's not responsible for her actions. She is. She absolutely is. But how she was raised, in the same way that how he was raised, plays a big part in her life. He was raised to be a loving man, to care about other people, to think, as you see with the story, to think about others first, to think about other people's feelings. That's the way he lived his life. Was he'd always put other people's feelings first before his own. Whereas with Chelsea, it was about herself. But because she never had anyone who really kind of loved her, really deep down, that's kind of the way she was raised. So, right. Let's. I'm going to do a dunk. I'm going to do a stroopwafel in a Tetley tea. This is very exciting. If you have stroopwafels, you're welcome to join me. If not, pause this tape now. Go over to Holland. Get some stroopwafels. Say hello to Preston while you're there. And then, so I've spilt crumbs on me. Right, dunk. I'm going to do a little dunk, because anyone who dunks like rich tea biscuits knows that they can last about half a second. I know people don't like listening to eating on podcasts, so I won't do any more, but the second we finish this, I'm straight in there. Lovely. That works nice, actually. So, where am I? Heading back into town at the moment on the boat. It was we've had a couple of days of some of the hottest days ever. It was 33 degrees, so, because I live on a boat, even though it can get bloody hot in here, it can get up to 50 degrees. I moved it into the shade, which was nice. I'm surrounded by trees. I moved it into a nice place in between some trees. So that was really good. So it's been relatively cool, really, except all the spiders and the earwigs. On those two 33-degree days, that was bloody hot. I did 2 tours back to back. 1 tour is a lot of work. 2 tours back to back is a lot of work. 2 tours back to back in 33-degree heat. Jesus, that was hard work. I went straight home. I didn't even have enough energy to eat cake. I had a big bag of cake thanks to Kim and Marita and Martine and Preston. But yeah, I was too tired to eat that, so I didn't. So yeah, that was a hot day. Update on the gas situation from last week. After I did that, because you remember I ran out of gas, so I couldn't make a cup of tea. Shock, couldn't make a cup of tea. So I got out my little trolley and I walked 2 miles to the nearest filling station, grabbed a 13-kilo bottle of propane and lugged it all the way back. And it was bloody hot. Bloody hard work, bloody hot. It was another day that was 33 degrees. But installed the gas cylinder straight away, had a cup of tea. Life was good. And then made some vegan mince and tatties, which was really good. Glad I did that. Amy, if you're coming around for dinner sometime, I will make you vegan mince and tatties. It's very good. It's very nice. Right, okay. Let's read you some stuff that may or may not have made it into this episode. Pretty much most at the start I've put in there. Ooh. Dog barking outside. Yeah, I'm glad I finished recording now, or finished the regular recording. David Morley, Jeffrey Morley's thoughts on the attack. He said, nothing I can do will ever bring him back, i.e. his son David. All I can hope for is that those who did such damage to my son will be given long sentences so that they can't do the same thing to others. When I looked into the... Oh, shut up, dog. I'm going to get another nasty email, aren't I, from the lady in New Zealand who took offence at the fact that I said, "Oh, shut up, dog." About a year ago. Weird woman. Yeah, I know. I didn't even say it directly to the dog. The dog was half a mile away. Weird woman. Oh, dog, shut up. No, it hasn't. So yeah, I looked into the what had happened to Reece Sargent, Darren Case, David Blenman. As far as I could tell, they're still in prison. They went in 2006. They had a total of 13 years each, so that would be technically, if they'd served their full time, which they probably haven't, they would be released this year. Most of them were first offenders, so they probably would have served half, if less, unless they've reoffended. So they're probably out. I did a search, couldn't find much on them at all. I could only find things on Chelsea, really. So, the investigation. Chelsea was arrested a week later at her home, having been seen entering the house, which her foster parents' house in South Norwood, with the same blue bag that is clearly visible in the CCTV footage. As mentioned, without prompting, she said, "That's what I wore on the night." There were no CCTV footage saw Mahoney film the attack on David Morley. However, she was doing the same in the CCTV footage in the final attacks of the night against the homeless man Wayne Miller. If you go online, the footage is still there. It's a relatively well lit doorway, and the camera's quite there, so you can pretty much see everything. I'll try and put it on my website, but it's hard to make out who the people are from that video. Extensive forensics tests failed to find pictures or videos of the attacks on any of the assailants' mobile phones. The attackers stole Alistair Whiteside's mobile phone. He was David Morley's friend, used it, and the police were able to track them because of that. Pretty stupid, really. You steal a mobile phone. I'll mention this later on, but they stole the mobile phone. Two of them did. I think it was David Blenman and Darren Case. I could be wrong. I'll check later on. Dog's still barking. Annoying. I've been distracted now. Oh yeah, the phones. Pretty stupid that you steal someone's phone, and the first thing they did, one of them decided to call his girlfriend on that phone. It's like, Are you an idiot or what? It's like, it's a phone. The first thing you do, if ever, here's a top tip: if ever you've had a bag stolen or something stolen, or even if your house has been burgled or something like that, step one, especially if a bag or wallet has been stolen, step one, have a look around walls within 100 feet of where you had it stolen. Because the first thing that a thief will do, because they don't want to be caught with it on them, whatever they've stolen, the first thing they'll do is dump it, and then they'll try and come back a couple of hours later when the heat has died down, and then they'll take it back. So that's what a lot of police do, is that they come into a scene, they go, right, where was it stolen? Right, and then they check the walls, because people, I've done this before. I was walking down the pub years ago, going to visit some mates in a pub. A car pulled up, some lads got out. I was like, oh shit, what's this? They ran behind the wall, they pulled out a VHS player. This shows how long ago it was, and then they ran away. They'd hidden it behind the wall because, they knew they'd come back for it later on. But But yeah, it's pretty stupid using... Oh yeah, if you've had something nicked as well, go to cash converters. Do you know one of those... Oh, really... I know there are other places that are equally as bad, but oh dear, there's no real checks there, and I've seen it many times before. Junkies walking in, you can smell what junkies smell like. As a tour guide, I've learned how to spot crack addicts and heroin addicts just by smell. It's a useful skill, but the amount of times you see them walk in with I saw one walking in once with shows the age of it. A VHS player with a VHS still in there and the wires out the back, and he clearly just robbed it from someone's house and made himself 20 quid off that. It's so bad. So an extensive investigation by the Specialist Crime Directorate Homicide Unit led by DCI Nick Scholar uncovered a raft of evidence to support the prosecutions. CCTV footage showed the gang gathered in Hercules Road, Kennington, before proceeding to the Waterloo area. Their route followed the path of the incidents at times consistent with the attack. I'll put a little map on my website so you can look at the attacks are all within visual range. They literally are, which is why they happen so fast. It's because they don't move that far. The arrogance is they attacked David Dobson on Lower Marsh, and then basically you go up some steps at the back of Festival Hall and make it onto Queen's Walk, which is where they attacked David Morley, which is how we know that they attacked from behind, because that's the route they came in and the bench was facing the river. They attacked David Morley and Alistair Whiteside, then they ran over Hungerford Bridge, so basically running in the direction that David Morley and Alistair were facing. Then they attacked those on the other side of the river. They attacked the three foreign students who were mentioned, and then they ran away in the direction of Jubilee Gardens, which is back towards Alistair Whiteside and David Morley. So they would have literally run past them again to get to Jubilee Gardens to attack Nigel Elliott, and then again they ran north again, heading towards Waterloo. So literally, they don't move that far. It's all within visual range. It's all like 100 meters, if that, each way. Each 100 meters, 200 meters maximum each way. So they really don't even go out of range to make their next attack. So it really was a bit of a spree. The footage showed them walking along Lower Marsh. They spread out across the road as described by David Dobson. The whole attack on Wayne Miller was captured on CCTV and shown in court. As a result of the CCTV footage at Leek Street, I'll show you some pictures online, which will show you all these locations. The detectives were able to recover fingerprints from the scene, which helped identify gang members. It also showed Chelsea O'Mahony holding a phone up, apparently filming the attack. Police recovered the phone, but despite extensive forensic analysis, were unable to recover any photos from it. As mentioned, her diary was there, which gave reference to the attack. A beer bottle was found at the scene on the attack of Nigel Elliott. That was in Jubilee Gardens, but the blood on the bottle was also related to the blood of Frank. I didn't mention his name in there because there are a couple of complicated names in there. Frank Pitasio, which is one of the foreign students who was sitting by the bench on the other side of the river. So the blood was related to that. Fingerprints belonging to Darren Case and David Blenman were found on the metal doors at the scene of the attack of Wayne Miller, consistent with the hang on. Here it was. So one of the students I just mentioned, Frank Pitasio. Doesn't sound right. See, if I would have put this in the story, I would have rehearsed that, because I haven't rehearsed it. Who cares? Frank's mobile phone was used to call Reese Sargent's girlfriend at approximately 4:03 a.m. on the morning of the attacks. She confirmed that Sargent said he was calling on a stolen mobile phone. Absolute idiot. What a massive retard. You beat someone up, you steal their phone, then you call your girlfriend and go, yeah, me is calling on a stolen phone, innit? Absolute moron. Get some brains. Chelsea O'Mahony was arrested on the 8th of November at her home, having been, as mentioned, the police saw her coming in with the distinctive blue bag. She said, "That's what I wore on the night of the attack." Well, she didn't say on the night attack, just on the night. She admitted being present for all of the attacks except that on Nigel Elliott, which is interesting. Why decide not to have that one there? She identified the other gang members, but denied any involvement in the violence. She denied filming the assault on Wayne Miller. This was the one where she said she wasn't filming it. She had her phone up and she was just checking her phone. Yeah, right. We already mentioned about the memorial. There was a memorial to David Morley. I didn't mention, but after this there was it's quite a big memorial for him. The Mayor of London, who was Ken Livingstone at the time, turned up and did a speech. Performance by the London Gay Men's Choir. And then afterwards, after the memorial at St Anne's, there was a procession that started from the Admiral Duncan pub. It started about 6:30, and everybody worked their way, because obviously that's where the nail bombing happened in 1999, which is an important part of kind of David's life. And they made their way down Embankment Tube Station, so going past Heaven, where David, the nightclub where David was the night before, that night. They went across what is known as Golden Jubilee Bridges, which is part of the Hungerford Bridge. Hungerford Bridge is technically 3 bridges in one. It's Hungerford Bridge is the railway bridge, and then there's the Golden Jubilee Bridges, which is the pedestrian bridges on either side of it, but it's technically the same bridge. They all went in silence. A long procession of, I think they said there's about 150 people, and everyone bought flowers and candles, and it was a very peaceful protest. They especially said no placards, no banners, no loudspeakers. This is not a protest. This is a remembrance of his life. What else is there? Just going through here. Done that. Trial. Mentioned about the trial. Yep. It actually started in October 2005 was the trial. But the sentencing wasn't until the 23rd of January 2006. So Darren Case, who was 18 at the time, Reece Sargent, who was 20, David Blenman, who was 17, were all charged with 12 years for manslaughter. And as mentioned, an additional 6 years for conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm, which was added on to the end of the sentence as well. It was to run concurrently. They were tried for murder, but the jury returned a verdict of manslaughter, as that is what the jury are permitted to do. I can't find any reasoning in there why they returned with a manslaughter verdict as opposed to a murder verdict. It could have been the fact that they'd done loads of muggings and it had been violent assaults, but no one had been killed, and they hadn't threatened to kill anyone. So that could be the reason why it was manslaughter as opposed to murder. Whereas if they would have turned up and said, "We're going to kill you," and then they kill David Morley, that would be murder. There was no hint that this was a homophobic attack at all. They had briefly spoken just before, like very, very briefly. They said there was a little bit of a brief chat before. There was no discussion of it being a homophobic attack. In fact, none of the gang knew that David or Alistair, actually it isn't mentioned whether Alistair is a homosexual man. David definitely was. So they didn't know that they were homosexual men. The people who they attacked that night was a real mixture: gay, straight, men, women. It was just a real mix. They hadn't picked people specifically. It was just nearest person goes on the attack. That was it. So all of them pretty much blamed Chelsea for the attacks. Especially some of their friends came forward as well and said that she was to blame for it. Even though Reece was meant to be the leader of the gang, he was limited intellectual capacity and easily led. It is often said by many people on here that she was the one who was kind of leading most of it. It was all random, indiscriminate violence. For what can only have been for pleasure. Hang on, where is the important bit? Where did I put this? Even at the trial, they said it was because of her they did what they did. She wanted to film it on her video phone. You can tell that these are old barristers are doing this because they refer to it as a video phone. She wanted to film people being beaten up. That was her will. She had the phone. She wanted it. The lives of the defendants held such little interest that they set out to use violence for its own sake. It was random, indiscriminate violence for what can only have been pleasure. Because she was underage at the time when she was at trial, 14 when she was committed the offence, 15 when it went to court. She had to stand in court with a social worker. It is said that although none of them showed any remorse, as your kind of lawyer actually always says to you, don't show any remorse, even when the sentencing is read out. She stood there holding hands with her social worker. Chelsea was sent to the Oak Hill Secure Unit and then on to HMP Peterborough, which is in Cambridgeshire. As mentioned, she is now free. Judge Brian Barker told her at the Old Bailey, "You became obsessed with the activity of catching people unawares, assaulting them and filming it for your own later gratification." September 2009, Chelsea enjoyed a trip out from her probation hostel in Bedford after being released on licence. O'Mahony, she was. They say that she was now aged 20 there. She wasn't. She was 19. Laughed and joked with pals as they wandered around shops scoffing fast food. Anything else? No, I think that's it. Good. Oh dear, that was good. I hope you enjoyed that. That was that. So, oh dear. Oh, I'm going to go and sit in Costa and edit this. Oh, there's a new Costa just opened up around the corner, which is it's new. Most people don't know about it, which is very good. I like those ones. And miracle, they have plug sockets at literally every table. Miracle. One of the places I go to, like one of the ones, sometimes before I do my tours, I go off and I get in there about 7 a.m. Just gives me about 3.5 hours to do some editing before the tour starts. And sometimes I'm sitting there and I plug my laptop in and I'm like, oh, why is my battery draining? And then I look, a whole wall of plug sockets are dead. They don't work. And then I end up having to run around the place going, oh, where's a free plug socket? And normally it's a big Costa, but when you get in there, there's one working plug socket. And normally you get there and there's normally someone sitting there with a book, a regular book, sitting there having a read next to the only bloody plug socket and they're not using it. Oh, that's so baffling. There should be a little sign, shouldn't there, next to, because so many of us need power for our phones and laptops and things like that. There should be little signs that say, "This is a table just for people who need to use a laptop. If you don't need to use plug sockets, sit somewhere else." Oh, if only. Anyway, so I'm going to sit there and edit. I'm going to eat some of my Stroopwafels. And edit this episode. So we've got 3 more regular murder miles to go. They're all researched already. They're all interesting, all very different. So I'm looking forward to those. This one was quite. This one I wrote really fast. In fact, yesterday I'd finished writing and rewriting it by lunchtime, and I was like, "Oh, I'm done." Okay, so I went into town. I had loads of shopping to do. I bought some new trainers. I bought some things for my eyes. I bought some pants. Got to get some pants. Got me medicine. Went to the bank. Got my post. My post box is about 30 miles south. So it's a bit of a trek to get in. Bank stuff, bastards. But yeah, that was good. So I'm ahead of schedule. So yeah, there'll be 3 more regular Murder Mile episodes, and then I reckon there will be 5 mini miles. I'm going to record the meander miles, because I've got to do the one in Rye and I might do one in Brighton. I'm going to record those, but I might use them next year when I need them. I think I'll pull them out of the bag when I need them, and then that will end with a 6-parter, final multi-part series. It is a 6-parter because I've already mapped out what the episodes are, and that brings us to the start of the new year, and then I can have some time off. So January, no episodes. February, probably no episodes. I might restart mid-February or start of March. I'm not too sure. I need a good couple of weeks, like a good 4 or 6 weeks to do a good amount of research, and I need to have some time off because I haven't had any time off since March. Yay! So only another 4 months to go with no days off. If you want to support Murder Mile, you can do via Patreon. You don't have to. Or if you really love Murder Mile, don't forget, please do go to iTunes, give us a review. You don't even have to write anything. You could just literally click 5 stars, click 5 stars, click 5 stars. It gets us up the rankings. Because at the moment it's slightly frustrating. Because obviously, like, Dr. Death is out again. Dr. Bloody Death. It wasn't even that good. It was adequate. It was okay, but everyone thinks it's amazing, and they go, "Oh, Dr. Death, Dr. Death," and because the people who make it pay a lot of money, it's at the top of the charts again. You'll see it's on all the banners on all your podcast catchers. If you go on any different podcast catcher, you'll see Dr. Death, Dr. Death, because they've got thousands of pounds to be able to blow on advertising, which is why it's at the top of the charts at the moment. Whereas, they only do like 6 to 8 episodes, where small podcasters like us who keep you entertained every single week, and we keep going for years. It's like Dr. Death, you go back now, you can listen to those 6 to 8 episodes, but you've already heard them. We're churning out episodes every single week to keep you entertained, and we all do it for free, and we don't have the money or the advertising to get to the top of the charts. So the higher we get up the charts, the longer we can stay, because obviously the more listeners we get, it helps our advertising revenue. We don't make much, to be honest. I would make more money if I was stacking shelves in Tesco's. I did the maths recently, and I worked out I earn less than £1 an hour doing what I do, but I do love what I do, which is important, but I don't make much doing it. So the more people who listen to the podcast, I know people say, "Oh, it doesn't make a difference." It does. The more people that you get listening to the podcast, the more revenue we get, the longer we can keep going. Obviously, So, and the more a cake I can have as well, which is even better. Which means I'll probably die of diabetes. So, that was this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Enjoyed it in inverted commas, obviously. You're not really meant to enjoy it. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Have yourself a good day. Be good. Stay away from spiders. Ta-ta!